This is Felisha Antioquia and Molly Elshaer on behalf of Brentwood Votes. Today we have the pleasure of interviewing Dr. DaoJensen, candidate for the Brentwood School District Board. Welcome, Dr. DaoJensen. Would you tell us a little about yourself and your background in education?
Yes, good morning. My name is Thuy DaoJensen, and I was a former education professor at the University of Southern Indiana for 7 years. So I designed and taught diversity and equity courses for pre-service teachers, that is, teachers who are not or entering the profession, new teachers entering the profession. So my class was a required course for all new pre-service teachers. So for 7 years, I prepared new teachers entering the profession. This was in Southern Indiana. I didn't really enjoy living in Indiana, so I wanted to move back to California, and I chose Brentwood as my home, my new home. Here in Brentwood, I am now the Brentwood Library Commissioner. So I represent Brentwood Library to the Contra Costa County Library Commission. So we attend meetings every other month, and sometimes we have to meet with elected officials to just reinforce the message that our public libraries needs to have stabilized funding. I'm also a parent of children in Brentwood Union School District. So I have a fourth grader, and I also have an older child who's in Liberty High School. And this year I'm the PTA treasurer. So I've done a lot of fundraising for the elementary schools.
So in 3 or 4 sentences, could you explain to us exactly why you chose to run for office?
Well, when my daughter first enrolled in kindergarten, I noticed that they were looking for parent volunteers to teach art and music classes in K-3. And it struck me as very odd. And when I spoke to the principal, she said, well, during the 2008 recession, they had to make really hard financial decisions. And so they cut our state certified art and music teachers to teach art and music. This is for K-3 only. And she said that the decisions were made by the school board. And so I started attending the school board meetings and realized that, I could be that. I could serve on the school board. I was an education professor. I certainly know more about education, and I've prepared new teachers entering the profession. And actually, before going back to grad school, I was an elementary school teacher in Arizona. So I definitely know about public education and advocating for public education and preparing new pre-service teachers into the profession. So that's when I decided I needed to run for school board. And once I made that decision, when I started talking to other parents who were parents of special education students and some of their concerns with the quality of education that their children were getting. So it's something that I think public education is the cornerstone of our democracy, and it's something that is very important that we strengthen, not only for our children, but it strengthens our communities when we have strong public schools.
What do you see as the biggest challenge facing students today, and how do you plan on tackling it?
Yes. There's so many issues. I think it's important that students develop critical thinking skills in their education. There are so many things going on in our culture that require critical thinking skills. And I think that's something that will be a necessary necessary skill to have, not only to prepare them for the workforce in the future, but to prepare them to be engaged as participatory citizens in a democracy. You need to have critical thinking skills. You need to understand, the history of our country, the complexity of, racial dynamics in American culture. And I think to really engage students in their schoolwork is to engage them in the community life. We want our students to be active participants in our community and in our society. We don't want them to, feel like they don't have a voice.
So as a school board member, you would help bridge the gap between the students in the classroom and parents in the community. So how would you go about restructuring and enforcing systems that simultaneously value students and community input?
Well, first, I'd like to, one of the first things I'd like to do is to look at the curriculum. Do we have an anti-racist curriculum? And then I'd like to look at the budget, because the things we prioritize in our school budget shows the priority of that we have as a community, the adults have for the children in that community. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said that budgets are a moral document. I'm paraphrasing. And I really feel strongly about that. The things that we prioritize says something about the community that we live in. So I'd like to see where the priorities are, and to maybe bring my own knowledge about education policy into ensuring that the things we prioritize benefit young people in the long run. So we're looking at curriculum, but we're also, in terms of racial inclusion, I'd like to really examine and analyze the disciplinary measures, expulsion rates that our schools are using right now. Our students of color being disproportionately expelled for misbehaviors and misconduct in the school over white students, say. Those are some of the things that we can be looking at to rectify, to make sure that our students are being valued and are being included in the school culture.
With all the current national conversation centering racial and restorative justice, how will you go about meeting student demands to uplift, amplify, and support students of all backgrounds and experiences, such as the LGBT plus communities, students with disabilities, low-income students, and other marginalized students?
Yes, that is something that is an ongoing issue. I think that we need to focus on getting mental health professionals into the schools to deal with some of the trauma-related experiences that our students are feeling right now. This pandemic has caused a lot of upheaval, job loss, fractured family relationships. I think that's, it's not something that is common, that we're prioritizing right now in the budget. And I'd like to see counselors or social workers with a strong background in dealing with mental health issues for our young people, and maybe even some of our teachers who are dealing with some of this, upheaval in their own family background. I think that there's so many things we could be doing in terms of restorative justice, things in dealing with misconduct and misbehaviors of students in the schools. Simply expelling them or punishing them is actually marginalizes them and excludes them from learning in the classroom. And I'd like to see more restorative justice practices in our schools, our K-8 schools. I know they're doing some right now in the high school level, and I sit on the Liberty High School site council, and I'd like to see more of that within our K-8 schools too.
So you kind of touched on this before. So Felisha and I were both former students of BUSD. So And like we just know how important it is to provide, our children and just, youth in general, with support when it comes to mental health. I know that's something that I really would have liked a lot more when I was in elementary school and middle school. So how you kind of touched on it again, but how will you implement effective mental health awareness and programs to show students and parents that you care even beyond when they graduate elementary school and middle school?
I think most importantly, we have to allocate funds for mental health professionals. The budget is a moral document. And in terms of being it, what we prioritize, what we think is valuable, what services we think are necessary for our students to have. I think we can start looking at the academic research in terms of how other schools have systematically dealt with, mental health issues or, racial discrimination in the schools. We need to start looking at the academic research and see what works and what doesn't work, because it's when we don't deal with mental health issues now, it just gets worse over time. And I think we owe it to our young people to work through some of these problems. And it's not just young people who have mental health issues, it's adults too. So it benefits everyone to have a strong mental health centered counselors in the school.
Okay, so those were all of our questions, and that concludes this interview. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. DaoJensen. Best of luck in the election, and we hope you have a great day.
Thank you.